Hey everybody, Randy Patterson here with Boomerosity. A couple years ago, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Steve Luongo, and he was a great rock and roll drummer. And he worked very closely with the late great bassist of The Who, John Entwistle. They were great friends, and Steve played drums for John whenever John was doing his solo projects. They toured all over the country, all over the world, and they were just the closest of friends. And unfortunately, 22 years ago, John passed away, left us far too soon. And a couple years ago was the first volume. It was, in fact, called Rarities Oxhumed Volume 1, play on the word the ox, which was John's nickname. And they referred to him as the Ox. Pete Townsend, I think, was the one that gave him that moniker. And there's even a biography out on John called The Ox. And so Steve has this tremendous archive of great unreleased recordings from when they were touring together, playing all sorts of venues, and probably not the song not played the same way twice. That was just the kind of band this was that Steve was in for John. And after John passed and some time had passed and that type of thing, Steve, with the blessing of John's son Chris and family, started cleaning up and remastering these alternative takes of songs and such, and they are such a blast to listen to. So now there is volume 2 of Rarities Oxhumed, and I got to talk to Steve again. We talked about some stuff going on that took place leading up to all of this, the book about the ox, and just his painting, his clothing line, all of it's just fun. We were just had a great time catching up and talking about all things music, and especially the late great John Entwistle. So without any further ado, here's my second of what I hope to be many more interviews to come with great rock drummer Steve Luongo. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerosity. Take care. Steve, it's been a couple of years. I was beginning to think maybe it was something I said. So
No, it was nothing you said. I enjoyed our last go around,
it
so
was a
it's
lot of.
no worries.
So before we get into talking about this new release, I got to ask you, how's the art side of your work going and the shirts, man? I'm still saving up my milk money to buy one of those great shirts of yours.
Well, it's funny you should ask. If I show you the closet,
Wow.
um, yeah, it's crazy. Um, it's going well, and listen, I'm blowing a bunch out, so I can, let's connect after the show, and
You
I'll
bet.
believe you. Because when I'm at the end of this line, just here's a little gratuitous self promotion.
Go for it. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. Oh,
yeah. So they're doing they did really well. I mean, I made because COVID kind of screwed me up a little bit with
mhm.
I was this close to a deal with Saks,
Really?
and I said to the girl, "When do I have to deliver?" And this was like holidays of 2019. She said, "Well, we won't do it until fall of next year." I said, "When is that?" She said, "June." I said, "Oh, June, no problem. I got, I'm ready. I'll be ready for June." And I was ready, but COVID wasn't.
Yeah.
And I got, I lost that deal because Saks was dark.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason that I still actually have shirts in stock, because I didn't stock any retailers. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to sell them through the website and do it piecework, easy, without having to cut in any retailers. And so there's still some left, but
Oh,
it's a nice full cut. No one ever looks fat in them, which is a good thing. Um, I mean, that's at least that was Eddie Money's take. No, I don't look fat in these. Yeah.
bless his heart. Yeah. Gosh, it's so who name drop for me. Who's the biggest ones you've had wearing your threads there?
Oh, let's see, man. It's a long list. Buck Dharma from Blue Oyster Cult, Eddie Money, Mark Farner, Mark Farner, Mark Rivera, who plays
Oh
sax with
yeah, Billy
Joel.
Joel and Ringo. Yeah.
Yeah, so he wears them with Ringo. He wears them with Billy Joel. Michael McDonald, Pete Townsend has one. I'm trying to rattle off the biggies. Um, Will Lee from the
Yeah.
Letterman Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a bunch of guys, and I'm forgetting. Oh, Billy Dean, country star.
Yeah.
Um, it's been very good. I mean, the guys, they all love them, and I'm thrilled that they do. There's so
Is
much
it something they wear on?
Ambrosia,
Oh yeah. Who from Ambrosia?
David Pack.
Oh yeah. I need to talk to him. I haven't interviewed him yet, but I know I've talked to people all around him, but I haven't.
I can hook you up. David's a phone call for me.
All right, let's do it. By the way,
Happy-
let me give you my email address so we can, we can communicate directly instead of going through there. And then mine's real easy, randy@boomerosity.com. So,
Okay.
and then that way, I can send you my address and all that. I don't want you quoting your email address over this. I mean, I could edit it out, but we might forget, and I don't want to cause you any problems. So, but I'm just up here and still in the Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. So,
Man, I tell you, I love the Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. I'm a big fan of Tennessee barbecue, and I just got a smoker. Not that
really,
kind. I've had that other kind for a long time, but no, I just got a wood smoker. So I love Tennessee. One of
well,
my
man,
favorite places
if
in
you
the
come
world.
up this way, I'll take you to some barbecue up here and see how you like it. So we'll do it.
I was is it what's the Lookout Mountain? That's Tennessee, right?
That's in Chattanooga. That's a couple hours south of me, but short drive.
When I was driving from New York down to Florida, I used to stop at Lookout Mountain because there was a guy at the bottom of Lookout Mountain before you started to make the climb
Right.
named Hot Sauce Charlie.
Oh,
Truck on the side of the road, and I stopped there just by chance once, and my wife and I loved it. It was such good pulled pork barbecue. I went back the next year. He was still there. The following year, he was gone.
oh man. Yeah.
Yeah, so but all good. Listen, God bless him. I hope he's doing well wherever he is. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to come and visit. I'm getting ready to do a lecture tour coupled with concerts. I'm doing. Oh, it's called the Steve Luongo Project, and it's really about every aspect of my life, the the tours, and I'm playing as part of the lecture. There's a performance with my new trio, so I'll get there.
Cool. Cool. What kind of music are you doing on the trio?
Classic rock.
All
We
right.
do I mean, we do a lot of the stuff of guys because I played with Jack Bruce, so we do a bunch of Cream. I played obviously with the AC/DC guys, so we can do a little bit of that stuff. But a lot of Hendrix, a lot of it's mostly classic rock covers.
Mhm.
I have always been a stickler for doing original material, and I realized that this is not the climate for that anymore. And I've got two guys that I play with, George Harris, who's from Florida, and Angus McEachran, who's also resides in Florida. And man, these guys just play. It's like it's the real thing because we're all from then. It's
Mhm.
not like somebody who learned it, after the fact. We remember when those records weren't out. And so it's pretty authentic, and I'm really happy about it. It's just a joy for me. I'm setting up, like I said, setting up a new control room, so there's drums. Everything's all over the place, getting ready for rehearsals again. But it's fun, man.
Wow. Well, I hope you come near here so I can come see you, man. That would be great.
Oh well, believe me, I'll make a point of it. I just made a new management deal, and I've got a branding manager who is, because I've got everything. I'm tying all the art, all the shirts, all the music, all the writing, everything all together. Kind of like the third act. So
Yeah. Yeah. I was saving this question for the end, but I'll ask you now because it sounds like it might fit well here. I picked up the book, on John Entwistle called The Ox. And of course, you were mentioned all through there. How'd you feel about that book? Did they do him a good job on there?
They only got one. I spoke with the author over many months, and that was authorized by the estate.
Right.
And he really only got one thing wrong with regard to my stuff. Excuse me. And I have to believe, it was Chris Entwistle that asked me to do it. And he was a great guy, very attentive, and he took lots of notes. And um, the only thing that he got wrong with my stuff was, I don't know if you remember my early band Rarities Choir, but
Right.
that was the band that John toured with. He came out with us, our bass player sang, and
Right.
John played bass, and we did that. And on that tour, because there was a lot of mayhem in that band,
That's
and he said to me, because I was in a really weird place, because here I am, I'm the liaison between the band and Entwistle, which when all of a sudden you're the drummer in a band, and now all of a sudden you're interfacing with, like, the big guy,
royalty.
there
Yeah.
can be a little resentment, so shall we say.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of bickering and a lot of just misunderstandings. And John said to me, "You guys remind me of the Who." And I said, "Wow, really?" He said, "Yeah, not in a good way." I was like, he said, "You got to get away from these guys. It's too crazy. There's too much craziness here."
Mhm.
In the book, Paul said that the reason that John wanted me to get away from those guys was because they weren't good enough players, and that wasn't the reason at all. John, we played together with those guys on and off over a couple of years. They were all excellent musicians, and our singer was one of the best singers you could ever hope to have. So it had nothing. That was the only thing that he got wrong. Everything else was pretty much right on. I mean, I don't think Chris would have let anything be said or written that wasn't accurate. And it was, I didn't say, "Oh, that never happened," or, I mean,
Yeah.
that was the only thing. Um, Outside of that, I thought he did a smashing job. It definitely captured who John was. I don't know that it captured all of who John was, because he was such a huge person. I mean, he was a huge presence,
Right.
but there was no inaccuracies. Everything that was there was pretty much spot on, except for the rat race thing.
I was curious. I didn't realize this until I read the book that I didn't realize Pete didn't make the memorial service. And that was he still upset at John, or was it just logistics, or what was the story on that? Do you
Well,
know?
that's, I mean, Pete is interesting. Pete is Pete. And when we all went to the funeral, which preceded the memorial, Pete actually sat near us, near Lori and I, and in the church, and it was, and he said to me, I was very gracious. He said to me, "Anytime you want to come to a show, you'll always be treated like family." And so I appreciated that. Although, it was hard. I went to one show, years later, and it was like, why am I here? Entwistle's not here. What am I doing here? You know what I mean? And so it felt really awkward. And like I said, Pete was gracious. But the interesting thing, and I don't know, Pete's life is complicated, and the memorial service was scheduled for the day before it actually happened. And Trinifold sent out all the invitations, and everybody got their invite and knew what they were going to do. And I knew my part. And then Pete um, said he needed to postpone it. So they changed it. It's very funny because I have two invitations, one for one day and one for the other day. And he did wound up not making that service either. Um, I couldn't tell you why. It was, I don't think it had anything to do with bad blood, because, after that, he did my film, Ox's Tail,
Right.
and couldn't have been nicer. I expected when I went to England, I rang him up and I asked, if he would do the film, and he said, "Sure." And so it was 21st of December, and I flew over and I got an English crew, and we met him at the studio. And I thought, I'll be lucky to get 15 minutes out of him. We sat there for 3.5 hours just
Wow.
talking back and forth, telling John stories back and forth. And so I don't, I never asked him why he didn't come to the service.
Yeah.
I don't think it had anything to do with, the family or John or anything like that. It probably just was a conflict that he couldn't get out of. And,
Yeah.
because who says I can't make it on the 20th, whatever it was. And then they postpone it to the 21st, and he doesn't make that either. That, I don't, Pete's not like my best friend in the world, but I think I know him well enough to say that that was not a slight towards John. It was probably a commitment that he just couldn't get out of.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious because I mean, they've been mates for forever, but yeah, logistics, commitments, all that kind of stuff, it happens. But so one of the things that saddened me in that book too, and this call's obviously about the album here behind me, but it just broke my heart to see that the estate and all ton of guitars and all the antiques, all that had to be sold for taxes. That just frosted me. It broke my heart to hear it. I'm sure Chris and the family hated to have to do that. Any stories around that you can share that you think fans might want to hear?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of rumors that John was broke and that he had to do these tours for the money. And I mean, that was not the case. John was excessive and he would often spend more than he had, but that guitar collection alone was worth millions of dollars. And his estate was worth millions and millions of dollars.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like, you're a movie star, you make $1 million for doing Batman, and then you don't do another film for 2 years. It
Right.
depends how you manage that $1 million.
Right.
But death taxes in England are brutal.
They are.
And the thing about the guitar collection is nobody was going to get that. Nobody wanted the house, nobody wanted the estate. Nobody wanted any of the eccentricities, that he collected, his suits of armor or the teapots or weapons or, that was not going to go anywhere. So I think, unfortunately, when people hear about these things, they water it down to, we had to sell everything to pay the estate taxes. And they had to sell things to pay the estate taxes, the death taxes rather, but they didn't, it's not like everything went and now all of a sudden we're the broke Entwistles. It wasn't like that at all. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, he had guitars that sold at that auction for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I know Jimmy Page bought one,
Oh, really?
uh,
Cool.
and what's his name from Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder bought, he bought quite a bit of stuff. Eddie's a huge Who fan and collector. So, I mean, everybody always takes the easy way out. They had to sell everything for the death taxes. They had to sell quite a bit for the death taxes, but it used to cost 40,000 pounds a month just to keep that house open.
Big
When you
place.
have 50 plus acres of manicured land and you've got 17 bedroom, basically it was like Downton Abbey. It's expensive.
Yeah.
Something breaks. It's not like, you go out and get a light bulb at Home Depot. It's it was an expensive thing, but John loved it so much, he didn't mind the sacrifice for it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and when he passed, the good old government said, well, we got to get some money out of you. And that's why Chris did the Sotheby's auction. And, I mean, he had such collectible things. Everything was worth just a fortune. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, those those
Somebody's
auctions can be so cool.
oh, again, there it goes.
Well, the dog's welcome to this conversation as well. I
That's
love
good.
that.
I don't know who's at my front door, but we'll find out.
So were these guitars on the album cover? What were those, the leftovers or? or those were
No,
sold?
no. What I did to go back to volume one, if you remember the cover of volume one,
Mhm,
um, we we put all I mean, there were a lot of the things that he collected, some of the armor, the weapons, um, and so I hid little things throughout the page. His favorite videotapes, his favorite movie, a book that he liked, alcohol that he liked. And that was, because it was exhumed, we were exhuming his life. And so that was the sort of the theme that ran through that front cover. So
mhm.
these bases are all the bases. They're the most prominent bases in his career. They're the things that he used. I think Frankenstein is in there, which is the base that was made from 5 other bases that he cobbled together, and his Rickenbacker's in there, the Buzzards are in there, and even the Entwistle Heritage base that I designed with Dean is hidden way in the back. I couldn't. I did so many sort of memory things, and throughout the album, it's really on volume one, I did his personal effects, the aftershave that he liked, the cigarettes that he smoked, and whatever else. And on this one, I did the gear. So if I'm sure you looked through the album, you saw the pictures of all the different amplifier rigs that he used over the years, and these were all of his most famous basses that he used, or at least some of them. I
Mhm.
think the flame bass is in there, the lightning bass is in there, and it was, I thought it appropriate for the gearheads that I should have the basses growing out of the ground, being
Yeah.
exhumed as well.
I love the play on thing. It's not really a play on words, but it's a play on view, and that's clever. I love that kind of stuff. So,
Uh,
volume two, what's differences between it in your mind? Differences between it and volume one, things like that. What's the story on volume two?
well, volume two for me, they always say the sequel is never as good as the first one, and I didn't want that to be the case with this. And it wasn't that I held anything back on volume one, but I think the studio tracks are the studio tracks. I mean, they were either I think I used my mix of horror rock, which we wrote together for the TV show, and I use different mixes. Because I have the whole archive, so I picked things that if you're really listening, if you listen to the vampire stuff, you can tell, oh, that's different, this is different, and so on and so forth. And there are great tunes on there. It's all, it's stuff that we wrote that I mean, it's some of my favorite material that I've ever written with anybody. And then the live stuff, um, I got to include a little bit more of it because I used God, it's hard for me to remember the track list, but I used Young Man Blues and a piece of Eminence Front because we would do these things when we played live. It was almost like a rehearsal. It was like we did whatever we wanted. If we wanted to stop in the middle of a song and laugh about something, we did. And the Eminence Front thing, uh, where it segues into Eminence Front, that was like one night that we did that.
Wow.
And if you listen to the thing, I forget how they labeled it on the record. I should have brought one in here. The Boris Blues. If you
Mhm.
listen to that in the beginning of it, there's a bunch of babbling on stage,
Shadows.
and somehow I said to him, "Oh, are we doing the blues? Are we doing the blues version tonight?" And John started playing the slow, and so we did. It was the Boris Blues, and then all of a sudden it cuts into 1, 2, 3, pop, and
Mhm.
we used. There was an arrangement when John played with the best, which was Emerson and Skunk Baxter and those guys. Emerson did the middle part of that has Night on Bald Mountain and Rites of Spring and Jaws and all those things. Emerson came up with that arrangement, and John really liked it. So we learned it. And we didn't do it every night, but we did it that night. So, the things that are on this particular record are truly rarities. They're things that we didn't do all the time.
Mhm.
And anytime you listen to a live track from our band, it's always different because that's what the fun of it was for us. We didn't stick to arrangements. If we wanted to go off and jam on, something, we did. It was,
Very cool. Were
so
there
yeah. So I think if there's a difference, I think there's more of an accent on our jamming and spontaneity and things that you might not have seen, even if you did see the band. If you didn't see it every night, you didn't see everything that we did. So.
ah, what surprised you in putting Volume 2 together? Was there anything where it's like, "Holy crap, I didn't catch this before," or anything like that?
Well, Long Live Rock,
Huh.
that's on there. And I don't know if the Who ever played that live. And that just happened. When you listen to it, you can hear the piano player just starts playing the figure to it. And what you can't see is me looking over at John going, you know, you want to do this? And that's how that happened. All of a sudden, it kind of just bleeds in, right? And then all of a sudden the song starts, and everybody knew we never rehearsed it. John had a lot of faith in me and the other guys that we would be all right, whether we knew something or not. And that's the way it was from the beginning when we did the Rat Race, that first jam at NAMM. He didn't know that we were going to know how to play their version of Summertime Blues or Won't Get Fooled Again. I mean, he had no idea, but he just went with it, and it just worked out. So that was a surprise to me because I hadn't remembered really doing that song in its entirety. Um, because we tried all kinds of stuff. So, and the other thing that struck me about Volume 2, because I had to digitize all of those
Mhm.
shows,
That's a
100 shows,
that's a chore.
and how different it was from night to night, how much fun there was in it. And I thought for a while I wanted to do, and I'll probably do this at some later date. The chatter on stage was John wasn't a big talker, right? But we used to talk back and forth on stage and just make jokes, and the funniest stuff would happen. And I thought, man, I should really do a track called, stage talk or stage chatter, because some of the stuff that he said and some of the stuff that we said back and forth was so funny, and it was so not John from The Who. It was John just being John. It was John in a garage band as opposed to being, in an iconic British Invasion, you know,
Well,
change the world.
Elvis had an album out that was just Elvis talking on stage, the whole album, vinyl, both sides, just him talking on stage, in between songs or with the fans or whatever. Yeah, you might be onto something there. You might have an album's worth of that, and that could be a lot of fun for diehard fans.
Well, the good news is when I would come upon those clips, I stored them all.
Ah,
So it wouldn't be hard to do at all. I mean, I remember we were doing, uh, I think it was Trick of the Light, and it's actually on one of the earlier live albums,
mhm.
and we were playing in Reno, Nevada, and he messed up. He went to the 4 chord early. And it was a mistake, right? And because we were recording every night, I just stopped the band right in the middle. I said, well, stop, stop, stop. And John looks at me like, what's going on? I said, well, we're recording. Let's try it again. And he said on stage, something to the effect of, we're going to do this one again because we're recording a live album. But if I stopped the song every time I played a mistake, we'd be playing in Morse code. We stopped the song every time I played a mistake, we'd be playing in effing Morse code.
That's funny. Well, kind of related to the surprises, and maybe you kind of touched on it already, is what memories were resurrected working on volume two?
Uh, uh, well, first of all, it's hard to believe that he's been gone as long as he's been gone.
22 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. We played together for 15 years, so it's hard to wrap my head around the fact that he's been gone longer than that. That I'm older than he was when he passed. That's what, because he was 8 years older than me. It's those kind of little flashes. Um, but the best part was, people think, and I've spoken to other people that have played with John over the years, and other people that sort of knew him, and everybody had that, watch out, this is John Entwistle thing, you got to be careful what you do or what you say or what you play. And I didn't have any of that.
Mm.
We would just take the piss out of one another like school kids, and it was such a normal friendship. I think the thing that I really realized going through all the tapes and listening to the banter and reminding myself of some of the fun that we had, it was just like real friends in a band. And to my mind, you're supposed to be friends with your bandmates. It's supposed to be like a family, not like Oasis. No offense but it's supposed to be, like a gang, us against the world. That's the way
Right.
I came up. I always was in a band with my friends. Now it didn't always stay that way,
Right.
but that was the beauty of it for me, because I until I moved to Florida, I thought what we did was totally normal. I mean, then I realized when I moved into a nice neighborhood that doctors and lawyers and money managers and whatever, they don't do what we do. Um, and
But they want to. They want to.
they might want to. It's funny. I picked up the golf habit when I moved to Florida,
Hmm.
and I was out playing with when I was doing the shirt thing. I was out playing golf with a girl who was advising me on what I had to do. We were trying different factories, and she said, "Oh, you're going to want to play with my boyfriend." And I said, "Okay." And so Lori and I went and met him at the golf course, and I said, "How are you?" And he said, "I'm good." And I said, "I don't know how we got onto it, but somehow his job came up." And he said, "I have everybody's dream job." And I said, "What? You have everybody's dream?" I thought I had everybody's dream job. What is everybody's dream job? He said, "I'm a professional golfer." And I was like, no, 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 no. But so anyway, I I I think we're blessed to do what we do. Guys used to say to me, "Wow, is it hard?" Well, you got to work a 40-hour month. That's how hard can that be? It's
And a lot
but
of waiting.
to come back to the point, I think what always resonated with me is how normal our friendship was, how just two guys telling jokes and being silly and whatever. My fax machine would go off, and we're going back to the days of fax, and I'd get a fax coming through my fax machine at like midnight, which is 5 in the morning in England, and it would be this. And it was like, and you could tell it was John's hand. I mean, it said, Corwood and whatever else, but it was just that. He would call me up and just start the most outrageous conversations. I remember one time we were in New York, and he said, "I need to buy a computer because I'm writing a book." And I said, "Okay, what do you want to get?" And he shows me this Toshiba satellite ridiculous thing that would probably take NASA to the moon, right? I said, "You need this to write a book?" He said, "Well, just in case." And this is going back, I think this was 90s, right? It had to be 90s because it was around the time of Daltrey Sings Townsend.
Hmm.
And so we got him this computer, and it was the one where you stick the mouse in the side of it, and it was white. And he said to me, I called me up once. He called me up once and he said, "My computer's frozen." I said, "Yeah." I said, "He said, what do I do?" I said, press Control Alt Delete. He said, I don't want to do that. And I said, what do you mean you don't want to do that? I don't want to do that. There's got to be another way. I'm on the phone with him for an hour. I'm reading whatever because this is the infancy of personal computers in the
Right.
90s.
Right.
And I'm saying, well, try this, do this, blah, 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 take the battery out, blah, 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 beep, beep, beep. And nothing worked. And I'm calling up friends on my other phone. How can I do this? Have them do this, and that, and that. And all of a sudden he goes, ah. And I said, what? And he said, I got it. And I said, what'd you do? And he went, I pressed Control Alt Delete. Then I'd get a call a couple of years, a couple of days later, and he'd say to me something like, uh, uh, how do you get your mouse out of the garbage can? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, fresh out the stuff it in there. And then he would call me up again and say that this computer broke my window. And I say, well, how did it break your window? He said, well, I throw it through the window. I was like, well, okay. This computer broke my window. But that was John. He was just, and I think the reason that we had the friendship that we had is because he really didn't want to have to be John Entwistle of The Who
Yeah.
every day. And I didn't, it was funny. I remember when we were first friends first couple of years. And he said, how did you get on to me? In other words, how did I, you know, and I said, well, I didn't really get on to you. I said, I didn't really understand your solo albums because I was waiting for it to be you and Keith Moon just going nuts for,
Mhm.
for two vinyl sides. And I said, and it was all this, it was like jokes and 50s stuff. And it wasn't what I expected from you. And I said, and then when Keith died and, Kenny took over, I sort of, the fury of The Who was lost for me. And I sort of strayed away. And I mean, it's not that I wasn't a Who fan. I love them. It's one of the most influential bands in my playing life. The recklessness and the energy and the aggression of that band, live at Leeds type, defined a lot of what I do. And I think it's why John and I got along musically so well, because I think that's what he loved about The Who.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were never trying to be The Who. You can't. I mean, you, it's like McCartney is McCartney, but he's not the Beatles. And if
Yeah.
you even try to go there, even though he's the guy, you can't do that. So we never did that. I mean, we played Who stuff and we were aggressive and bombastic, but that was John's contribution. He used to say, if Keith Moon ran The Who, it would be a surf band like the Beach Boys. And if Roger ran The Who, it would be a country band.
Hmm.
If Pete ran it, it would be a jazz band. And if I ran it, it would be the John Entwistle Band, which is why we played that band the way we did.
Mhm.
That was the essence of what John wanted musically. He wanted to be reckless. He wanted to be loud, obviously. He wanted to be free, and he didn't want to be restricted to anything. He had the ability to fly, and he wanted to fly.
Cool. So I know those songs on the album, or see how old we are. We still call them albums. The, I know they're all cherished by you, but is there one that you would point to, one song that you'd point to on there where you would say, hey, if, listen to this. And if you like what we're doing here, you know, as a fan, you're going to love the whole collection here. Is there one thing you would point to?
Well, I would have to point to one of the studio tracks and one of the live tracks. I mean, the live uh, Young Man Blues is that's just let's go nuts, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's just so. If you like the fury of that, you're gonna like all the live stuff.
Cool.
And it's hard for me to pick the song, the studio track, but I'll pick one, the one called Sometimes. And when we wrote that song, I had written the body of it, and I had written some of the lyrics, and we wrote a bunch of the lyrics together. But the day that we were going to record the song, he came downstairs with like I don't have anything near me to make an example, but with a music book with blank stabs in it, you
Mhm.
know, that you get if you're taking music lessons and you're
Right.
lessons in. And he had written in pencil um 8 chords, right? 8 6 note clusters, 5 note, whatever they were. And I have it around here someplace. Um, and he said, I came up with an opening for Sometimes. And I said, okay, let's hear it. And he has the keyboard player sit down, he puts the sheet music in front of him, and he plays the chord, right? And it's like a horrible chord. And then the next one is even worse. And the one after that is even worse. And it's 8 of these dissonant, dystopian, ridiculously abstract chords that don't make any sense to me.
Mhm.
And I'm about to say to him something unkind.
Are
And I
you
said, you
not?
know what? Maybe you better just let him get the thought out. So we go through the whole thing, and when we recorded it, and he had the guitar player play the part that he wrote for him, and he played his bass part, all of a sudden it was like, how did I not hear this?
Mhm.
And what struck me was he was laying in bed, got the idea in his head, wrote the chords down without having an instrument or anything else there, brought them down the next day. And the beginning of that song is just, that's the genius of John Entwistle. Uh,
Mhm.
he was so good at that type of thing. It was amazing. So I think, um, you know, writing the lyrics with him, I would write "No one listens, no one cares," and he would write "Who will answer silent prayers," and it was just like a conversation between 2 people that had so much history that they could just finish each other's sentences, and it was so. I think that track, I love that track, and there's, you know, when the sun comes up, the same thing. But I think sometimes for me, those chords, and they happen twice in the song. They happen at the end, but they happen at the very beginning. It's stunning if you know, especially, and no one will ever be able to hear it the way I heard it for the first time
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
only heard the keyboard, you know, clusters, and it was like,
Isn't it
what?
isn't it funny about music that something sticks with us, and that story is a good example of it, where after all these years, when you hear that song, that's what goes through your mind. For me, the first concert, I might have told you this the last time we talked. The first concert I ever went to was Elvis, and it was 1973. I was 13 years old. And Elvis introduced the song. He said it was going to be on an upcoming album. The song was called I'm Leaving. And, you know, here I am, this punk kid. I'm not even in high school yet. And I heard the song and I remembered it vividly. Steve, I've searched furiously for that song on an album for years. And it wasn't until I signed up for Columbia Music Club, you know, and I got this multi-disc set of Elvis stuff. This would have been in the 90s, early to mid 90s. And I get
Wow.
this collection of 5 or 6 CDs, and the song was on there, and I played it, and it was exactly how I remembered it from 1973. So over 20 years later, I'm here, and I'm not a musician, right? So I just had this burned in there, and isn't it interesting how songs just burn into our brains? And that story you just told, you remember those chords and how it was, you know, that bare naked ugly sound at first, and then those other layers, and what you saw that he brought to the table on that, and how that exemplifies his genius. It blows my mind about music and how it
Yeah.
does that. So
And the fact that he did it all in his head, it was very
yeah.
reminiscent of Mozart. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It just
Yep.
he, I don't, you know, it was he never used to fail to amaze me. And the things that he did, or the things that he knew, or the things that he shared, were just I mean, I hope if anybody gets anything out of this record, it's really what a huge part of music in general John Entwistle was.
Yeah.
He was just brilliant. And but at the same time, I remember excuse me, I remember we were either doing When You See the Light or one, I can't remember the song. And I said, we need to double track the bass. And it was like, okay. And he went and got an 8 string and we double tracked the bass and it was this huge sound. And then at the end of Endless Vacation, um, that's on this record, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, and Endless Vacation is it's about the Who. Nobody told me life up here was an endless vacation. I hope I get old before I die, my degeneration, right? So he's kind of, taking a shot at the Who, like they never played enough for him. He would have been out there 24/7, 365 if he could have been. And the Who would go out for 6, 8 weeks and then they'd work on another album. That was his biggest gripe was that he didn't get to play live enough, and he loved to play live.
Mm-hmm.
And so he wrote Endless Vacation when we were rehearsing at his house, and he comes in with this book that's called Endless Vacation, and it's about all the vacation spots, secret vacation spots around the world for exotic vacations. And he said to me, "Have you seen this new book about the Who?" And it was like, and then he wrote the song Endless Vacation. And at the end of it, I said, well, if we're gonna take a Who jab, we should at the end do like a Won't Get Fooled Again thing. So if you listen to the end of Endless Vacation, and I'm sorry I'm getting my albums muddled up, it's either volume 1 or volume 2. And if you want to be sure, you got to get them
Get
both.
them both. That's right.
Right. But at the end of Endless Vacation, it goes ba 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 and it ends like that, sort of like the end of Won't Get Fooled Again. And I said, "Oh, let's put your bass through a wah-wah pedal and you hit the beam, no, 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 no." And I'm sitting there rocking the wah-wah pedal back and forth while he's playing the bass notes. So that little synthesizer mocking thing at the end of Endless Vacation is our sort of, thing that Won't Get Fooled Again.
Very cool.
Yeah, anecdotal.
So what's next, Steve? Any more oxymations or anything like that?
Well, it's a good question. I certainly have more than enough material to do it. The thing that holds me back is I don't ever want to do something that wouldn't, if I was going to do a volume 3 or anything like that, I would want it to be at least enhancing 1 and 2. And if I can't do that, then I won't do that. So like I said, I have hundreds of shows, and if I do anything, I think it would be really fun to release a vinyl of the chatter on stage, and maybe the mistakes, or maybe because we had so much fun on stage. And I'll tell you one story it was so funny. We were, I want to say 97, we were recording live every night. And we were out for months and we had a 10-day hole in the middle of the schedule. I was like, what are we going to do for 10 days? We're in the Midwest. We can't just stop. We had 2 buses and a truck and a crew and hotel reservation. And it's a big deal to take that many guys out. So we called the office and said, look, just book us anywhere so that we can keep playing. It doesn't matter if we play to, 20 people. It doesn't matter. We'll at least get good recordings. And some of the recordings, which is why I left some of the applause sparse, because they were in places like Juanita's Cantina and the old post office or this and that. And where the buses were bigger than the facade of the front of the club. But we're playing Dodge City, Kansas.
Mhm.
And I was going to use this track, uh, but I would have had a hard time explaining what it was. We're playing Dodge City, Kansas, which John was a huge cowboy fan, loved the guns. He
Mhm.
loved it. Just loved it. Whiskey Man, his first song he ever wrote, was based on something that was said in a western. I'd have to dig deep for what it was, but it was I can't remember the actor. He was talking to an imaginary friend. Come on, Whiskey Man, we're gonna go do the come on, Whiskey Man, and that's where Whiskey Man the song came from.
Ah,
Um, but so we're playing Dodge City, Kansas, right? And I said, John, we got to go to Front Street. We got to go look at, all the stuff. It's Dodge City. And we did it. He got up early that day and we walked through Front Street and went through I took pictures of him in the Who Scow. And, I mean, just, so, it was just funny stuff. But that night when we played the show, there were 7 people there. And it was just like giant, I don't know what it was, a club, obviously, but a massive club that went on forever, and it was black, so you couldn't really see. It was just like endless, and there were 7 people standing in front of the band, right? And we're playing like we're at Madison Square Garden,
mhm,
because that's what we did. We didn't really care. I
mhm,
mean, John used to love to blow people's minds. That's why he wanted to play live, because he wanted to, if you can make the lamp disappear, you're going to want to do that and watch the look on people's faces.
mhm,
So we're playing, we're playing flat out, like just balls to the wall. And these people are standing in front, 7 people standing in front of the stage. And there was one guy that would walk all the way out of view, and he'd run as fast as he could and then just fall down on the wooden floor and skid to a stop. And you could actually hear his skin go.
mm.
And there was another guy in the crowd of 7, and he had his arms down, and he was jumping up and doing this, jumping up and down behind the 6 people in front of him, and just jumping up in the air like that. And we were laughing so hard, not John, because John was turned around looking at me, which he did quite a bit. Um, and we were laughing so hard we couldn't say. I think we were doing Had Enough, which has big harmonies in it, right? And we're listening to the tracks back, and you can hear us going. And it's so hysterical. And John said, "All right, what's everybody laughing at?" And we told him to turn around, and he looks at this guy, and he goes, "Oh, he's spawning." I was like, it was like a fish jumping out. It was just the craziest thing. 7 people, and one of them is spawning behind.
Funny.
And the 8th guy he didn't even count the 7 people, because he was just running back and forth in the venue, and he would drop on the floor in front of the band and skid to a stop and get up and go and do it again. It was just insane. So that's, those kind of things. If you weren't there, it was, but yeah, spawning. So I'd like people to hear that. I'd like to figure out a way. I don't know, because it's so funny when we were in England playing back the tracks. We played that track, and you can just hear the keyboard player, the guitar player, and I trying to sing the backing go, "Life is for the living," and we're like, and Bobby Pridden, who was engineering the records, he goes, "What is this? What's going on here?" And it just brought back all those memories, and we just laughed, man. It was just fun.
Man, well, I'm glad you're doing this. I hope there's some more good material. Again, I think fans would agree with you. We don't, you know, there's always going to be somebody criticizing, but man, when there's good stuff, especially from those archives, it would be so cool to hear. And I'm glad you're taking the time to do this because it speaks to your friendship and to the genius that John was. And I'm glad you're doing it. I hope it's helping the estate too. I hope Chris and the rest of the family are blessed by it because of what it does, to John's memory and such. So I'm glad you're doing it. And the
Well,
album covers are always cool.
I'm sure they are. I mean, I still am very close with Chris, and he's been a wonderful ally through all these things. Because the one thing I would never want to do is something that tarnishes the reputation or takes away from anything else. And John was so important in my life that I want to be sure that at whatever I do, it's done with respect. So, never say never. I just would have to be very mindful about how I did anything going forward. But, like I said, never say never.
That's right. That's right. Well, Steve, this is a lot of fun, man. Let's not wait 2 years this time. All right, man.
Hey man, I'm
I,
I'm here. Send me a link. I'll be back. It's not like I'm in a shortage for stories, and maybe once they finish wiring this whole thing up, I can play you some stuff.
well, let's do that. That'd be a lot of fun. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be always just in support. I can do what I want with this thing, man. So let's do it.
Well,
And if there's anything I can do to help on anything, please let me know. I've got time, but like I said, if you drop me a note, I can jot your email address down, whatever. It would be great to just stay in. I don't send jokes. I don't waste your time. I mean, if I got something to say, I'll tell you. Otherwise, you won't hear from me. But I'd love to plug your work, no matter what you're doing. And if you're here in the Smokies or nearby, let's meet up and have some iced tea or some
sounds
barbecue
good
or
to me.
something.
Nothing like a good sweet tea. I'm
That's
all
right.
about that.
That's right. So
So I'll be happy to hook you up with Pat. He's a great guy. Um,
anybody
and
else for that matter, I don't care if they're not, as long as they've got a good story and involves it, they don't have to be in front of the mic all the time. If they've got something good going on and contributed to what we like to listen to, I'm game. So
Well, it's funny because the last tour that John and I did together, part of it was the John Entwistle Band, and part of it was a walk down Abbey Road.
yeah,
And Pat was one of the singers. David was one of the singers on Walk Down Abbey Road. And on my rock and roll show and tell live stream, I've been playing some of the tracks from that. So it's amazing to hear him sing, Magic or what, any of the Ambrosia stuff. It was cool and funny to watch John Entwistle play Ambrosia songs.
I bet. Now,
Yeah.
did Dave, didn't he have like a winery or something? It seems like I remember reading that years ago.
Well, he's in that part of the world, him
Mhm.
and he's still very close with Michael McDonald. So they're in wine country, and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, he's a great guy, David Pack, just a fantastic musician, and he's got some stories for you, and I won't spoil them.
Well, good. I'd love to talk to him. So let's stay in touch. And like I said, my door's always open to you, Steve. If anything you got out that you want to plug, let's do one of these and make it happen.
Sounds good to me, my friend. Thank
All right.
you.
All right. Thank you. We'll talk to you again soon.
All
Take
right,
care.
real soon. Take
All
care.
right. Bye bye.